Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of the Kevin Moore Show. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Michael Orwig. Now Michael is an international speaker and author with an MA in hypnotherapy. He has studied and taught esoteric wisdom for more than 20 years, and as a former 747 captain, he has traveled the world connecting with the subtle energies of the earth. Michael and his wife live in Denver, Colorado, and Michael joins me now to discuss his work on quantum children and much, much more. Michael Orwig, welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
It's great to finally have you on. Our paths crossed a number of times in Colorado, and I'm, honored to have you on. I remember when I first met you, it was intriguing what you were saying when you were discussing some of your work with me about the Indigo children. And I think, first of all, let's just talk about your background as well. Now, you're a former 747 captain. You've got a master's, you've got a degree. You come over with quite a grounded background, yet you have your other foot, one foot into the aviation and one foot in the metaphysical. Obviously, you've reflected back on this to why that is, but as you start seeing the things, the bigger picture of where you're at with your life right now, you can probably see that you needed to have this career to finally end up having done the books that you've done right now as well.
All of that. One of the energies we really haven't talked about very much is that I'm an earth keeper. And as an earth keeper, what occurs is individuals like myself have been in service to the planet, Mother Earth, and actually carry within our energy field a fiber from Mother Earth herself. And we normally have a natural healing ability, and great deal of my travel as a pilot, I was able to do different healing work across the planet, crisscrossing without having to pay the airline fee. And so magically, I wound up flying internationally for nearly 20 to 25 years. I visited every kind of sacred site you can imagine, doing all kinds of ceremonies. And that's a large, large part of my path metaphysically. But the last 12 years has been in support of the children and writing about the children. And I've been doing less traveling over the last decade. But for a large part of my later adult life, that 40 to 60 time frame, a lot of international travel, and everywhere I'd go, I would work in visiting the different energy sites around the planet. And the children's stuff started coming to me about 12 years ago. I started getting downloads about the new children. I've got degrees in math and psychology from Duke. I've got a master's in mind-based medicine from Quantum University. And it's just how the mind works and the psychology of everything going on. And then you have the psychology of the light councils over this planet, and that lovely desire to try to have a better picture of what's going on behind the scenes has fascinated me for a very long period of time.
Yeah, I was going to say there, you've obviously been a seeker for a long time. What sort of got you into that area as well? I mean, and obviously, your wife is also in her own career as well. I mean, was there a sort of crossover with your wife's work and what you're doing as well?
Well, yes and no. I actually started my awakening back in the early 90s. And that started with healing work, a lot of hands-on healing work, starting with Reiki. A lot of us started with Reiki in that area. I got divorced in 98, but I actually started in the early 90s with the healing work. But in 98 to 2001, Pluto, the planet of change, crossed my ascendant back and forth for 3 years. And my goodness, anything in my life that could change did change. And that really was a huge catalyst where I was opened up to some amazing teachers in both the healing arts, uh, extraterrestrial, past lives. And of all of it, the past lives probably was the one thing that just I was amazed with and I couldn't get enough of. And magically, I wound up studying QHHT, which is quantum healing hypnosis therapy, pioneered by Dolores Cannon. And we start every session pretty much with going into the Akashic records and doing some kind of past life regression for the client. But unlike a session where you're saying, I want to go look at something, we let the superconscious guide them to what's important for them to see. And because I've been open to looking off planet, I get to see a picture that most people could not even believe. I mean, I don't think if I've ever done several sessions with a single client, I've always had an off-planet lifetime. So many people have come from around the cosmos to be here now. I just laugh at the term alien or whatever, ET. Well, we all are. We're all star children in some fashion, and it's fascinating to get a glimpse of that I get to see in some of the sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm guessing, well, I'm not guessing, I know it would have done, but, being a former 747 captain, that kind of career would have kept you, pardon the pun, but very grounded, do you know what I mean, when it came to doing this other side of your work?
Well, flying international, 747, you're in the airplane for 15 hours. And you're kind of captive with my poor co-pilot over here, and I like to talk. So it gave me a lot of training to talk to people on all kinds of subjects, but also being conscious of what they can hear. If I'm pressing a button that maybe is a hot button, I tend to avoid religion. Certainly avoided politics. Other than that, you can really talk about a lot of subjects. And I'd talk crystals, I'd talk earth energy. Everybody's different, but you'd be surprised how even from that population, engineer, military backgrounds, what you'd ordinarily would think of is very tied to structure, how many people actually are aware, but they're kind of in the closet. They're not going to be out actively talking, but if I open the subject and I'm mindful and respectful and, well, just healing. Sometimes it's easy enough just to talk about the medical community and everything is energy and healing it from light and sound instead of big pharma. Everybody recognizes that. I mean, I've never had anybody ever, not a single person ever say, oh my goodness, they are doing such an amazing job giving me drugs. I mean, just really, it doesn't happen. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can enter into a conversation. When you got 15 hours and you're the captain, it's easier when you're the captain.
Yes, absolutely. And right now you are teaching. Is that what you're doing?
I'm teaching out at United's training center, and I teach on the 737, and I have a lot of fun working with the guys as I continue to do my other work. It kind of gets to play the day job, but I do have enough time off to do a lot of my interview work, service work, book writing, everything else I'm doing on the side, and that's. I wouldn't be there if I didn't have enough time to do the other. It's too important a work and too much of a time frame right now.
Absolutely.
The stuff's got to be out. The stuff's got to be out.
Now, okay, with the quantum children, What took you in that direction? How did that come about?
When I write, I found out 20 years ago that if I was to write, it had to be some form of intuitive writing. You could call it channel writing, stream of consciousness, one of those kind of styles within that. Standard left brain, do an outline? No. And my first book I published in 2005 on the subtle energies of the earth and crystals and anything around in that. And it was about 2 years after that book came out, I started having the feeling. It's not a word from God coming in, shouting in my brain. You get a feeling of, no, it's time to start writing again. And I'd start going into my meditations. And then I started getting information in the meditations about the children. And I just started making notes. And the books evolved from it. Now, book one in the series, I rewrote 4 times, almost over 8 years. I'd write it, set it aside, write it again, still wouldn't be happy with it. And finally, book one came out in 2016. It was one of those, I have 2 years, I have to redo this and get it right and put it out. So consequently, that was book one, and it's more informationally driven. Book two, being more story driven, it was fascinating because the individual case studies, I'd have 90 pages of transcriptions. And as you would go through them, it would just magically almost write itself as far as the information about this child or this parent or whatever. It would just kind of jump out at you that, no, this is a point that someone could relate to. And that's how book two came about. But book one took me a while. I was almost 8 years playing with book one in the series.
I can imagine. Now, well, let me ask you this: what are the quantum children? What is the thesis of the book about?
Okay. Well, let me go back a little bit to why I chose that name. In general, well-meaning individuals love to label different groups. We had, as you mentioned earlier, you're familiar with the Indigo. Many people are familiar with, to some degree, the crystal children, the rainbow children. I was told pretty much straight, and I'll say just by spirit when I'm working with a lot of these phrases, not to really introduce another term. So I use the quantum children in 2 ways. These children coming into the planet are aligned for unity consciousness. Quantum physics represents that unity, all things are connected side of things. And that's a lot of why I chose that term. And I can also use it to include anybody that's awakened, that's living from, in essence, unity consciousness. And that's where I'm at. But a lot of times I'll just say the new children coming in. And then people say, well, what do you mean by the new children? How far back are you going? But really, it's a shift from separation consciousness, which I look at as fear, competition, control, versus the connectivity of all things. And that's the unity consciousness, where you and I are connected wherever side of the planet you and I are on. And you have cooperation versus competition. You have oneness versus separation. And then you have the letting go of fear. It's all part of the unity consciousness that we're all shifting into.
Okay, so I mean, could we use the word indigo child? I mean, is it the same thing as a quantum child?
I consider the indigos part of the quantum children. And the Indigos are a fascinating group because when you look at the history of the different groups that have come since I was born in the 50s, Dolores Cannon described three separate waves of volunteers that have come in to raise the vibration on this planet high enough to break out of this amazing dark energy cloud after World War II. The two world wars, World War I and II, Mother Earth was really crying for help. And as I understand it, the light councils determined that if someone like yourself of a high vibration came in, went through the full amnesia, and many haven't, but still went through the full amnesia, chose to be a soul here and go through your own awakening, same as myself, that they could raise the energy around this planet in a very short period of time, and it did not count as an interference. And so millions of high frequency souls have volunteered that weren't dealing with old karma. That's just it. Now, they may be helping us clean up karma, but they weren't just coming here to do a third density karmic run another cycle of life type lifetime. And so we have the Indigos. They were the first ones. They were the first major group that came in because we had to have somebody look at the structures, and they are our structure busters. They're the warriors. They need the warrior energy, but they need help. Crystal children came in with focus and amplification. That's what crystals do really well. Rainbow children brought in harmonization in the groupings. And I go back to my days of playing different fantasy type things, and you'd have your team, you'd have the wizard, the cleric, the fighter. No, it was always a team with different skill sets that were brought in. But the first people that came in had to be the structure busters, and it was a tough gig for the Indigos. Guys like, well, your namesake, Michael Moore, if you think of, is a documentary filmmaker that points out where structures across the planet are not in integrity. And most parents don't realize that the last things to change on our planet, in our reality, are the structures. They are stuck energy predicated on the time frame when they were created. And we keep thinking government's going to change. No, government is last to change. Education's going to change. No, there's too many financial interests in the education system to expect that the structure will change. The structure can be bypassed with other forms of education, but trying to take a structure on head on with all of their money and everything else, it's very daunting. But you can go around the obstacle. You don't have to go head on. But it's important to realize every structure, in my opinion, in this society is nearly 100 years behind where they should be. You can look at education, medical, as having energy medicine is 100 years behind. Certainly the family unit could use a solid upgrade. And then you go with your big two, you got religion and governmental. They love to make it look like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but no, they're still trying to maintain status quo. It's as simple as that.
Okay, so how would you know if you were a quantum child then? What would the signs be?
I look, just to give you an example, my next door neighbor, a longtime pilot at United, good friend of mine, his son and their family are here, and they've got a 4-year-old and you take one look at her, you hear her open her cute little mouth, the awareness that comes out of this little girl is off the charts. And you just know this is an amazing soul occupying this little body. Um, you can have your own intuitive feel, but honestly, in my research, the Earth's contract for us to have a soul come in with old third density karma to play out ended in 2012. So the only children coming in are children that are aligned. That doesn't mean they're there. They're aligned for the unity consciousness and the higher frequencies. But we start conditioning these children in the mother's womb from the beginning, and they can be conditioned back into old patterns. And the problem with that is, the best analogy is mom and dad are a computer, and this beautiful baby girl is also a computer. She's your state-of-the-art computer like you and I have. Windows, she's a quantum computer. Let's put it that way. She's a quantum computer. And when I buy a new computer, don't I want to reload all of my old programs from my other computer because I've spent so much time and effort and energy loading it? Well, mom and dad are Windows 98. And you take those programs from that Windows 98 machine and try to put it in this one, I guarantee you files are going to get corrupted. Things aren't going to work right. And of course, in the worst case, you could crash the entire system. And that's what's happening when you program a child that's on a soul level aligned for unity consciousness with the old fear, competition, control. It's the two aren't going to mix, and you're going to have a breakdown within that individual at some level.
Okay, so I mean, what does a unity consciousness soul look like in the sense of once they're entering the world from an adult's perspective as well? What is the different sort of patterns that they're going to come out with? Are they much more of service? Are they more in tune with their intuition? Are they what is the recognizable characteristics that they're here to bring about?
It's a very good question, and the answer is yes to all of that. Each individual is an individual, and I see about 80% of the children coming in now as being anywhere from highly empathic to very, very empathic. There's that's occurring. The awareness, picking up other people's energy. There's just so many different ways that it manifests. Now, behind the scenes, the DNA is changing, but it's not as much seen in the physical. It's still being seen more in the etheric DNA. And I'm sure you probably have heard that. I never actually knew who did it, but we're moving from a carbon-based body to a more crystalline form of body, and our DNA is changing. Well, it's absolutely happening for these kids. I have heard, I have not seen firsthand, that children's DNA has had more than our normal 2-strand DNA. They have actually found children having that. I don't have firsthand information of that, but I've heard of that occurring. Certainly the intuitive gifts that I'm hearing are, they make me look like, just way behind. But what maybe took me 20 years to awaken, these kids are bringing in naturally. And if the parents and the structure got the hell out of the way, the level that they could flourish would be amazing. And that's what a lot of what I do is to write about, basically saying less is more. You know, a parent in our society today, and you being newly married, congratulations, maybe have little Kevins in the future or whatever. We are conditioned to naturally want to guide the child into a world of our past that we're thinking about. But do you and I really have a clue as to what this world's going to look like in 10 years? How much change have we seen over the last 10 years that's going exponential, and project that 10 years and 20 years into the future? If we ever got disclosure and the technologies that have been held back ever were released, whether medical or free energy wise, we could be in a Star Trek level civilization in hardly any time at all. It's just, different structures want to hold them back for their own purposes. And people like yourself write documentaries to try to shake the status quo a bit. And that's it's a great piece of service. It's not an easy one, but it's a great piece that you guys do. And everybody's got their own, in my opinion, unique genius. And that's going to show itself in so many different ways. It's hard for me to say, look for this, you're going to see that. In my interviews with the moms, I had one child that was such a giant soul, and he was born into a preemie body, 1 pound 5 ounces. That was Zach that I wrote about. Another one of the kids was Nico, and he was an earth angel. So then I had to go in, okay, what's the energy of an earth angel, and where is that going, and on down the line. And the only thing I really care about for parents is, can you help them align themselves to their soul's path, and then get out of the way and learn from them. That's another one. There's a huge number of these children have come in to help mom and dad with mom and dad's shift. And that's always the intriguing, being the flip-flop. I'm here to help. No, you're here to watch them go do their thing. And it's not just one thing that you can simply point out, but I always look at the awareness. That's a biggie.
And do you think most of these quantum children are born into families where the parents are very supportive of that type of child coming in? Or can they be born into families where it is completely opposite to that, and anything spiritual, anything alternative is pushed out the way and will not be discussed?
Yes. They're coming in across the board, and that's why work like myself, anybody else that's doing this kind of work, it's so important. But for somebody to pick up my books or look at my videos, that kind of thing, I really think they need to be awakened at some level to have an interest in that, or they'll just play status quo. And one of the things that's interesting, just from my psychology, is we absorb everything from mom and dad up through age 7. It's literally overlaid directly into our subconscious. All of mom's patterns, dad's patterns, right, wrong, good, bad, whatever. My mother was born in 32. And just think of that overlay, how fast and far we've come in a short period of time. And you try to explain to parents, if they're listening, the level of change that they need to allow for their child, but they're the biggest model for the child. They are modeling everything they've got going on. So the more personal work they do, to me, that's one of the best things they can do parenting is work on their own self-love, work on whatever worthiness issues they may have, victimhood issues, learning how to create and manifest. Uh, One of my favorite subjects is manifestation. And if I teach one of my daughters or son that we are creator beings, you cannot see and go into the victimhood and fear. I can't be a creator and a victim at the same time. And so the more that a parent does their own work, the more that they're able to be the model. And it's not what they say, it's their entire state of being. That's what's transferred over into the kids.
Okay. What about maybe future parents or potential parents watching this now? How do you raise such a child, in a sense? I mean, what are some of the points that came from the interviews that you did with mums who have such children? I mean, what were their advice?
Well, I've got about 10 hours worth of material.
Yeah.
uh, One of the things, and it depends on the age. Now we're very much depending upon the age. My wife, Allyn, to me, it all starts with the food. It starts with your state of being and learning how to meditate as a parent. If you model meditating, your child is more likely going to be a meditator. If he or she learns how to meditate in school, but mother and dad don't support it. One of my favorite quotes from the Dalai Lama: if every 8-year-old learned how to meditate, we would end all violence on this planet within 2 generations. I mean, it's as simple as that. The care and nurturing, that's always there. Loving them unconditionally, hey, that goes without saying. But with these new children, parenting is as much modeling as it is doing something with the child or for the child. Certainly being present in the moment is huge. That point's been brought out over the years, especially in the last, 20 and 30 years. It's more important than anything to be present with them. Now, if you can keep them awake and aware and keep the toxins out of them, hey, that is no small task in today's toxin after toxin allowed by the Food and Drug Administration, the medical on down the line. So the more that, as an example, my stepdaughter, my wife's younger daughter, has a son that's 3 going on 10, and she's done a yogic background, and she's done vegetarian for many, many, many years. She's a recording artist, does music with him. He's been playing a ukulele since he was 2 as a guitar. I mean, he's just an amazing, amazing grandson. The more that you can keep them open, you're not having to fix it later on. And that starts absolutely with the food and all the rest of the toxins that are going on. And how calm and quiet, nature, huge. Most of our society does not get out into nature nearly enough. These kids are very sensitive. Nature is tremendously grounding for them. There's that. Now, as far as when the kids get a little bit older, the one thing I thought I did the best with all of my kids is when I was learning and my awakening, I was learning how to tap into my own internal guidance. And anything I would learn metaphysically, I'd let the kids learn. And as a parent, by the time the kids are 10, I would have them tap into their own internal guidance for every question you can imagine. And then as a parent, when they ask, can I go to the party? My answer to that is, well, can you prove to me it's in your best and highest interest? If you can prove to me it is, not manipulate or anything else, just prove to me that something's in your best and highest interest, I'll support it. Now, can I manipulate a pendulum? Yes, the kids can. But still, in today's day, my youngest is Katie, she's 30. My son will turn 39 next month. When something is up, I don't just offer my 2 cents worth. I normally say, what's been your guidance around it? What have you been getting? Because I know they do, because I brought them up to tune into their own internal guidance. And I started with a pendulum, and then regular arm muscle testing. I went with that with kinesiology. You can use a finger if you wanted to, but I used a pendulum. Both my daughters were tremendously intuitive, and they could get all kinds of hits without ever doing anything. It took me a while. I was an older guy trying to wake up or whatever, but my son does. It's interesting. He's done a lot of different, if you want to call it divination, different sets of modalities. I've learned how to use the tarot. I've do my own meditations. I meditate almost every day in general, and having a conversation with my body is huge. This body listens to everything we say, and you better pay attention to the words coming out of your mouth and how you feel about it, because it's going to reflect energetically everything going on around you, but it's not taught to people. And the medical community, unfortunately, loves to say, do anything you want, I have a pill to fix you. Instead of, how did you create this? What's it reflecting in your life? Yes, we can address some of the symptoms, but if you have a core trauma that's manifested physically in some form, if it's not psychosomatic or emotional at such a level that doctors say, well, you need to go see a psychiatrist instead of the MD. No, they're just kind of tossed out. But when you see that your body is constantly reflecting, teaching the kids that, how did you create that? What's going on?
Wow. Okay. And again, this is all in the book as well. Some parts of this are in the book.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I went through that quite a bit in book one. I did an entire section on health and healing, and I love teaching manifesting. I love teaching about how the body reflects. One of the more intriguing chapters I wrote in book one was on gratitude. What happens energetically throughout your entire energy field just being in gratitude? I mean, we see just such a small amount of what's going on energetically when we're really in these good places, and it's fascinating.
Well,
But
what about discipline then? Because obviously that's another tough one, isn't it?
it is. I came through the military. I played in sports, and back then everything was very much about discipline and hard work, and all of those have merit. And to be honest with you, I'm not that good at trying to explain disciplines. I've actually talked to my stepdaughter Erin about it, and she had some They had found some different people that were pretty good at that as far as how to work with the younger kids. A lot of it is because I went through my awakening when my kids were significantly older. My kids were 10 and up. So I wasn't trying to do a training with a very precocious 1 year old, 2 year old on down the line. Now, one thing that I did learn was to distract and deflect the the energy as best you can. I read once in one of the Stanford studies, they went through and counted supposedly how many times a toddler would be told no in a year's time. I mean, it was like staggering, 100,000 no's. And we wonder why we have limitation consciousness instead of kind of getting away from the no and deflecting them into something that's a little more safe. But, recognizing with parents, fear is huge. We're conditioned in this society that if you don't worry as a parent, Kevin, you're not a good parent. And yet, what we focus on expands is the number one thought in creating and manifesting. And when you're worrying, you're focusing on exactly the outcome you don't want to have occur. So, yes, it's one thing to recognize there's a danger over there, but we have to see and be conditioned to go to the positive, not to the worry. And it's once again, it's how has our society been conditioned? Well, if you turn on the TV, how much fear is conditioned in every advertisement, every TV show? Oh my God, just go on and on and on and on. And no wonder people are conditioned to be a worrier. And our society says you're a good mom if you worry about the kids. Well, no, you see them in the highest light. Have you ever heard of the Pygmalion effect? Okay, I wrote about it in the book, and it was I'll say this brief, it was a psychological experiment done almost 50 years ago, and there's been many replicated experiments since then. But basically, it was they did this at an elementary school, they tested the school, and then they told the teachers who would be the best student for the next year. Problem was, of course, being a psychology experiment, it was all randomly done. But they measured and looked at and briefed the teachers, don't teach any differently. But each one of the children's that was told to the teacher that they would be the best actually turned out to be the best. And it goes to how we express energy. And they've tried this in business, and positive psychology has sprung up from it. We do so much better when somebody is thinking of us in a positive light. And yet, when we're with the kids, do you naturally talk about how good your child is in a particular area? Or do you tend to tell your best friend, oh my God, you should have seen what he did today? We all have some flaws in that mix, but we tend to focus way too much on the flaws instead of all of the positive traits that people have.
Absolutely, and I guess I know that this conversation is about the quantum children, but this is sort of obviously good for anyone that's got kids in a sense. Some of these practices, but sending positive messages, to these kids, is an important part, is what you're saying here as well. And
there's another part of that, Kevin, actually, and the way it was explained to me by Spirit was even holding an image of someone in the field before they can even hear you. Let's say you've got like one of my kids that are in their 30s now, and they're going through a hard time. Do I want to focus on where they're at with, we could say, well, that's reality, I'm seeing it as reality, or do I want to focus on them in the very highest light? And when you put that energy into the field, you're adding to the very highest energy around them. And when they're able to step into that energy, they can. And but it's counterproductive if you see the flaw and you say, "Oh, my daughter will never do that," or "My son will never, he's never going to amount to anything," whatever. It doesn't matter what challenge area they have as a human going on at the time. We all have challenge areas, but I want somebody to see the best in me. That's what really adds to the quantum field and really what the parent can do in the best way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, and I suppose it's not going to help, if the parents are arguing in front of the kids and, showing, disruptive behavior in a sense. You've got to model the kind of behavior that you want that child to see in themselves as well. Do you know what I mean? Yes, you may not think that kid's taking the energy on of the argument, but they're soaking it all in.
What about when dad has a bad day at the office and he's not even in the space of the child? They are quantumly connected, and the child on an energetic field can feel everything going on with mom and dad at a distance. And my generation, I know, was taught just don't do it in their space. Don't do it. The kids know what's going on. They may not say something, but they know what's going on. But it's the quantum entanglement, and understanding that is just, it takes it to a whole nother level as far as recognizing that when I'm at work, my state of being is affecting my family at home. And most people, it's not even something that becomes part of their awareness. They just hope to eventually get in the car and get calmed down by the time they get home, if they don't hit road rage, unfortunately, before that first.
Well, yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. So, okay. So with the quantum children, then, again, we've talked about the signs of how you may recognize that you've got such a child. But again, it can be, this can be applied to any, to most kids' upbringing, just to come from the space that you're suggesting. So this is kind of like a manual, even for a new type of parenting, in a sense.
Yes, very good. And when we say how do you raise a quantum child, one of my questions I ask when I do a talk is, have any of you raised a fifth density child? And the answer is no. None of us have, at least not in this dimensional plane. And so, in essence, we're all kind of playing the blind leading the blind and trying to help each other. And so, in many instances, when I ask my very intuitive women with children and everything else with my books, I'll ask it, what worked well for you and what didn't? That kind of thing. Uh, what's helped keep their awareness? What did they trigger? What didn't trigger? What's really worked well? And we go from there. It's not going to be we're not conditioned to really live fifth dimensionally. Our language is still third density language, and you can just tell by the words we use and the language. We have to catch ourselves.
And also, just one question I wanted to ask you. I know we're getting a little bit closer here to the end of the interview right now, but I suppose, how can the parents support their children, especially the quantum children, to be on their path as well, or to get on their path, in a sense?
More than anything else, not get in the way. be aware that their gifts and their genius may not lie within academia. And unfortunately, the education system represents only about what I call about 2% of our human genius. These kids have come in for a new earth. Who knows what talents they're bringing in? Telepathy, uh, kinesiology. I mean, just on and on and on. So many different things. We're moving into telepathic communications. Their level of connectivity is off the charts. What about when they start tapping into universal consciousness? Any and all of this we want to support. A lot of, unfortunately, old religious dogma gets scared if something's new. Oh my God, that's of the devil, or, fricking whatever. Allowing and recognizing, being aware and present with these kids. If you're seeing as a parent something unusual that's, you don't want to shut them down. You don't want to tell them no. You don't want to tell them don't do that. But there's more information out there to try to help them recognize when their child is so empathic, as an example, that when the grandfather, and this was one of the kids I just heard about, when the grandfather was going through a surgical procedure, this child's heart was so open, she wound up getting the same scars from the procedure on her physical body. So she wasn't just feeling it. She was so open in her field. Now, if a parent has never seen that, and let's face it, that's empathy at an extremely rare level. If a parent hasn't said it, they could easily freak out. So all I'm saying is we're trying to get as much information as we can out there to help the parents. But, oh my God, I mean, I've been at this for more than a decade, and all I know is the more I know I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because bringing a child up the experience is so different, isn't it, to the manual in a sense. Even though what you've put out there is so helpful, right, and will be helping a lot of people, is helping a lot of people. Once you're on stage, you only get one chance sometimes, don't you?
Well, the easy part to remember: the child chose the parent for the potentialities the parent is giving them. It's not always ours. There is a soul level contract that goes on. That soul, in general, that doesn't mean it happens every time, but 99.9% of the time, that soul is not going to come in through that set of parents without a soul level choice being implemented to come in, recognizing all of the potentials that parent can offer. And it's fascinating sometimes to look behind the scenes at that. And I did that in book 2, as far as why did you choose mom? Why did you choose dad? What gifts did they bring that you were tagged into? And the best advice I had at the very end is be prepared at any time to completely disregard anything you know or thought you knew about parenting, and just be present in the moment and go with what your heart's saying in that moment. That's easily the best advice anyone can have, but you have to be present. You have to be aware, and you have to be willing to just go with it. And remember, we're all working in a very new energetic of the new timeline, the new earth, the vibrations that are going on, and people don't like change. So it's a very interesting dynamic for people wanting to hold on to the old.
Yeah, and isn't it different times as well where, you know, kids don't play outside as much as they used to nowadays,
And they
and
need to.
even the young, yeah, and the young kids are, sort of, you know, watching a lot more kids YouTube content than they ever used to, and that does create, obviously, a bit of free time for mum and dad to get on with other things when that's happening. But if you've got a quantum child, or any child in a sense, because you still, you want to, make sure that if you're coming from that spiritual aspect, to do the best you can do in that present moment. But there, what do you think about the current state of media consumption, and is there another way?
We have the kids on tablets at the dinner table. We have games like Fortnite. One of my grandkids is 14. He's amazing. Freaking champion. He'll go play these tournaments, but he spends hours on the computer. And as someone that's got a master's in mind-based medicine, I know what that does within his mind, but it's addicting. And if there's any way that you can, if you want to say keep things in moderation, keep things a bit under control, get them in nature. One of the things they do is they take the kids camping, and all electronic devices are off and gone, and that they have a big camper they take. So I won't call it camping. It's more like carrying your mobile home with you. But still, they do days where they're not having any electronics, and gee, sometimes the kids actually survive a day, just having fun in the woods. But you're right. I rode my bike to school without a helmet. Can you believe I survived actually doing that? And shit, I mean, if you let your kid walk to school now, it'd be like social services would have you up on charges or whatever. No, it's just way too much fear. Yes, some of it is good and mindful. But the world I grew up in I was born in 54. The world I grew up in is very different than the world today. And unfortunately, the kids don't get out much. And the conditioning in society, as an example, the sun is one of the most amazing carriers of light codes to our being. And yet, when was the last time on a bright sunny day could you count how many people were not wearing sunglasses? What percentage? And we need the light from the sun, and we need to be in contact with the earth. One of the biggest problems grounding wise for children, children and adults, is the rubber soles. When we started wearing tennis shoes of different kinds, rubber's an insulator. It blocks the connection with the earth. Well, I grew up playing barefoot, but I'm like everybody else. I'll tend to, be using some form of sneaker or Sketcher or running shoe or whatever. And how can we get the kids more barefoot? They'll be healthier. I mean, it goes on and on like that. And it's a different world, isn't it?
Yeah, it really, really is. And what would you say is the most important message of your book then, or books that you've done so far?
We live in a time of great change. And more than anything else, I want to empower the parents to make different choices. The structures in society want to keep you in status quo. These children need different choices. And it's across the board in every field, every aspect of life, medical, education, on down the line. And you just have to really start learning to tap into your own guidance as a parent, help them tap into theirs, and then get out of the way. We've had the term follow your heart for forever. And then what do? We ask then, what were you thinking? What were you thinking when you did that? But I said, follow your heart. But what were you? Yeah, you see where I'm talking about, where we create this duplicity, that we add it here, but we pull it back here, and learning how to respect all things, letting go of judgment. Oh my God. I mean, just think if parents only focused on letting go of all forms of judgment. What an example they would show to the kids. I could go for that.
I know, right? Well, look, we have had a fascinating conversation right now, and it's definitely given me a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure other people as well. And there's so much more to your work than just some of the bits that we've discussed today. Do you know what I mean? There is a lot more in the books. And again, just remind us of your website as well, please, Michael.
Well, it's just my name. It's michaelorwig.com. So it's Michael, MichaelOrwig.com. And the main focus I'm working on right now are the interviews and videos, which is part of my YouTube channel, which is The Wizard's Chest. And I'll be adding at least an interview every week with a couple of other videos with it. And you can check them all out. They'll show up on the website as every week.
Okay, so we will link in the description of this video your website, the link for the book, and also the link to your YouTube channel. So just go to the description below in this video right now. And I'd just like to say, Michael Orwig, just thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Kevin, and look forward to seeing you in the very near future when you come in through Denver, hopefully with your new bride, and get a chance to meet her. And congratulations to both of you guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cool.